Thank you everybody for coming. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces after so many years. I am Professor Robin Harvey from New York University, and I'm pleased to be joined by my colleagues here on stage, Professor Frank Tang, also from NYU, Jin Ying Lao Shi, also from California, Yuezhou Jin from Brooklyn, and Lynn Lin from Manhattan. So, unfortunately, Michèle Braud from the Louisiana Department of Education was unable to be here in person with us today, so she will be sharing by video if the videos work. We hope they will. So, you know, when this conference first started, some others have said it was about 15 years ago. The first time was in 2008, and the field of Chinese language teaching was in K-12 was pretty new. And so this conference was really prescient. And over the years, at that time and over the first years, there was a real need for Chinese teachers who were trained to teach in pedagogy. Now we have a maturing field, and teachers have a lot of experience. And so now we need to think about what the next steps are. It's a kind of a challenging time. We've talked earlier in earlier sessions about the challenges of the political climate. We have the challenges of being a teacher in the era of COVID. So Michèle and I, when we were talking, decided to call this session, You're Here, Now What? What are we going to do next? We're teachers in the field, we're here at NCLC. How can we get back that spark, our love for teaching, and then think about how to reinvigorate our careers? So today we're going to share some stories of careers in the field, and the people that we've asked all have very different career stories and are at different stages in their careers, and I think through telling these stories we all will have some new ideas about what might be held in the future for us. So let's see. So opening and introductions done. We're talking now about reigniting the spark. Then we'll share some career stories. We'll ask you to think about what could be your pathway to leadership. And then if we have time, we'll have some questions. So let's see, here's Michèle from afar. And if you're on Zoom, you may be able to ask Michèle questions. She's here today, not in person, but on Zoom.
What is leadership, and how is it that we achieve it? What is our pathway? When I started my career, I started off with studying at Louisiana State University, where I earned my bachelor's degree and my master's degree. But then I moved into the teaching career where I taught for 25 years. And what I would say whenever we think about leadership and our pathway to leadership is that everything is intertwined. So while I was in the classroom teaching, I was continuing to take courses. I was continuing to write scholarships, to study abroad, to continue my learning through professional development. And part of that learning was because someone at the Department of Education or someone at Louisiana State University encouraged me to do that, reached out a hand and welcomed me into the fold. For instance, I started as a mentor teacher for student teachers in my second year of my career because a professor invited me to do that. My principal encouraged me to join the school improvement team, to apply for the textbook adoption committee, to do different things and to share where my strengths were. And so whenever you're thinking about your career and how it's progressing, think about that intertwined pathway where you are teaching, you are an educator, but simultaneously you are building your leadership career.
Now me. So Lynn actually had this great slide of a timeline, and then we all adopted this timeline slide because we felt it really gave you an idea of the way to think about our careers. For me personally, I didn't do it by year, but instead by kind of stages in my career. I think about every 5 to 7 years I start to get bored and I need a new challenge. So I have had a lot of challenges in my life, and I've categorized them into a few different places. So first, I am a non-heritage learner of Chinese. So I'm here to represent the non-heritage teachers of Chinese. Raise your hands if you're here. Yay! did not start learning Chinese until I went to college. And that's when my eyes got bad too. That's when I started wearing glasses, as was mentioned earlier, because those characters are much smaller than letters, right? But I studied Chinese in college. I was a Chinese major, and then I studied in Taiwan on 2 different occasions. I had a fellowship to study there after I graduated. Back in those days, it was not so easy to study in mainland China. It was as expensive as going to college here. So it was much easier and cheaper to go to Taiwan. After that, I did not want to be a teacher. I wanted to travel. So I have a whole other life before I became a teacher. I was in the travel business. I first was a tour guide to China, and then I actually owned a travel agency for a while, which stood me in good stead when I did decide to go back to school. When I did decide to go back to school to become a teacher, I decided I wanted to start a Chinese language teaching school. And so I did that, and at the same time, I basically just built a website. My philosophy was, if you build it, they will come. So I built a website that embodied my philosophy, and I started recruiting students in my neighborhood. I went to schools to say, do you need an after-school program? I went to schools like Little Red Schoolhouse and said, do you need a summer program? So I just kind of put myself out there to try and build my business. At the same time, I was in the master's program at NYU learning to become a teacher. So again, as Michèle just mentioned, there were 2 prongs. I will say also the other reason that I shifted my career from travel to education at that point is in the upper right-hand corner. But now they're grown, but at that time my boys were small, so it was hard to travel. Once I did that, I also became a middle school teacher, and then I started thinking about how to help others. And I met, of course, Professor Tang was my mentor at NYU, and he started this project developing Chinese language teachers. So here I moved from just teaching kids to training teachers, and that's been the path since then. Around 2010, there was a shift to immersion education, so I shifted to studying about immersion education, and our project did as well. So now, I
think you skipped that you once owned a school.
I did. So I established a school called Greenwich Village Chinese. You can see I called it Xicun Zhongwen from the West Village, because we live in the West Village. So, that was how, you have to have some kind of organization when you have a school. It's protecting you from taxes and etc. So I built a website and started a school. So, I went the wrong way, sorry. So, what we want to think about today is what does leadership mean to you? We had originally hoped to have a poll here that you could all answer, but instead I'm going to pose this question to my colleagues. So we'll start with Professor Tang. Frank.
When you talk about leadership, I'm thinking about someone with an open-minded mindset, someone who is willing to make a change, and someone is ready to make a difference. That's what I'm thinking about a leader.
Thank you.
And I think I want to share my favorite quote. Yeah. A leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
And for me, leadership is not about being charged. It is about leadership taking care of those who are in your charge.
Well, I think we're all leaders. The fact that we teach makes us leaders, and we influence and plant seeds in all of the children, right? And in our colleagues. So for me, I think a successful and good leader is someone who is reflective, who can look back and say, how did that class go today for me? How did that class go for my students? And what can I do to improve for myself? What qualities and strengths do I see in my students? And what areas of growth do I see in them and in myself that I can work on?
Awesome, thank you. Mm-hmm. So that brings me back to that thought that Chris Livakari shared right as they ended their session. It was almost as if they were preparing for this session. Mm-hmm. He said that we're all teachers, but all teachers are also leaders. So I want to take today to really think about the qualities that make people leaders in their own classrooms and in their own communities and even on a larger scale. So think think as you listen to the different speakers, think about your own interests, beliefs, goals, and leadership qualities. Awesome, thank you. So there is actually a brief called Cultivating Leaders for the Chinese Language Teaching Field that's available on the Asia Society Celine website. And in that brief, we talked about 7 principles of culturally responsive leaders. So in the brief, we talked about stimulating intentional and purposeful teaching and learning, so teachers as leaders. Leading and influencing others by modeling exemplary practices, so being a role model and a mentor. Building and supporting the infrastructure for teaching and learning, so creating the systems. Promoting and facilitating continuous growth and improvement in yourself and in others. Don't have the rest. Developing a culture of collaboration by building trust and effective communication. Challenging ourselves and others to a vision of excellence. And finally, viewing development of our own careers, our own leadership, and our systems as a continuum. We may start the journey and others may, to use a football analogy, take the ball and run with it and score the points. So we may be the people who hand off the ball. Sorry for the football analogy. Who knows that I love football? Raise your hand. So our first story today about leadership is going to be Frank Tang's story so far. And you can see here that Professor Tang was first an English teacher in China, and he came here as an English teacher, but then became a professor. He worked in the English teaching field in the Albitax, and it was the Cabitac when you were there. And then he became a professor at NYU after he finished his doctoral degree. And in 1999 established the first Chinese state certification program on the East Coast at NYU, the first New York State program. And he's been involved in many different organizations. In 2007 established Project Developing Chinese Language Teachers at NYU that provides professional development for teachers. So along his journey, he's been involved in building infrastructure, building schools, building programs at universities, and building professional development. So schools for kids, training for teachers, and professional development for teachers. And so he's a builder, he's also an advocate and a mentor. And I think if I ask the question, how many people feel that he's been a mentor to them, probably in New York, maybe I see a bunch of hands out there. In New York, many, many teachers would raise their hands. And at NYU, in our program, many faculty members view him as a mentor. So I wanted to ask you, turn the tables. I get to, what is it, the student becomes the teacher, the student when you first started in the field of Chinese teaching, it was a baby field. You established a lot of the organizations that are really big today. How did you know where to start, and how did you see the gaps and work to fill them?
Okay. First of all, it's a little embarrassing when you see the timeline. It shows the age, or you didn't put the dates in, so it's good. But my life timeline, you look, it's not as colorful as Robin's. It's a school owner, a sales lady, a travel agent, a schoolmaster, and professor. My life is simple: a teacher, a staff developer, a teacher educator again, and now even retired, still a teacher educator. It's very boring. But anyway, so back to your question, is how I start to look at all those changes. That's something, it's about me. When I moved to the United States in 1984, many of you were not even born yet, if you are the 90后, 00后的. I was a doctoral student, and I studied at NYU for 5 years. And I was teaching Chinese at East Asian Studies at NYU. But my background was mainly in teaching English. But when I finished my PhD, my first job was a teacher at high school. You know, teaching at high school prepares me for all the changes. When I became a professor, when I got the opportunity to do something bigger than just a classroom teacher, I started to look around, as I said earlier, What is a leader? A leader is someone who is never satisfied with the status quo. Someone is always looking for change. Someone who wants to make a difference, to get better. That was when I put into the position at NYU. I was given this tiny foreign language education program with probably a dozen students enrolled. And the language was Spanish and French. No Chinese, no Japanese. That was when I started to think, I'm now a foreign language education faculty at a major university. Why we don't have any Asian languages? That's the first thing that occurred to me. And I started to look around, and there was none on the East Coast. I couldn't find anything. So that set me going, that what I'm going to do. And then, of course, the environment changes, and I started to think about that, and I got colleagues from East Asian Department and said, why don't we start this? And I went to Albany, the State Department. I talked to the people. What should I do if I want to start a Chinese language bachelor's degree, master's degree, teacher certification? And I have to create a lot of courses and a lot of curriculum. And by the way, I can't work this alone. I work with my colleagues. And later, when you had one project build up, and you start to build on that foundation, and we start to move on more projects. So that started the ball rolling.
Awesome, thank you. So, but then you did CLTA of Greater New York, the Chinese Language Teachers Association of Greater New York, is a founding member. He has helped establish the Shuangwen School, the International Leadership Charter School, and there's one more, High School for Dual Language and Asian Studies. So you've been on the boards of all these programs. You were on the Asia Society Chinese Language Task Force. This all was happening around the same time. And the opportunity was ripe, and you just moved in and made it happen.
That's correct. So now the time is not good. We still have to go ahead.
We still have to keep going. But we owe the generation of teachers who have made this all happen a great debt, because that is why our field is what it is today. So
thank you.
That's why I wanted him up here. I wanted to thank him.
Thank you to all my students.
All right. So now my next question is, can you share the name of a person who has influenced you or encouraged you to grow? I want to start with you.
Me? The one person that influences me is the mentor that I have at NYU. And he was the one who hired me when I was teaching in public school and later at Baruch College. And when I stepped into NYU, and the first thing he told me, he said, Frank, get ready to take over my position because I'm going to retire in 3 years.
Wow.
That's the pressure and challenge you're putting on me.
Awesome.
And that's the one who inspired me.
Right. But you know how to create a culture of trust. So you learned that from somebody, or is that maybe just you?
Well, it's part of me and part of learning experience and process. And I always have this teamwork spirit. You know, when I became the director of NYU MMS, I had in the faculty my mentor of my doctoral studies. And I'm the only non-English, native English-speaking person being the director, while all the faculties are native speakers of English. And they were my teachers before. And that was tough to be a leader and how to create a culture that we all respect each other and work together.
Yeah. Thank you.
And that's where the Chinese character comes in. Be modest, but work together.
Awesome. And
I think the person who I really call my mentor, and in Chinese we say 贵人, is Mr. Duarte Silva. He is actually at the conference right now somewhere, maybe at the leader upstairs. Exactly. So even when I was a student teacher, I got a chance to meet him, and I think he always gives me positive energy. Whenever I have a problem, when I ask him, he always says, I have the answer. Just tell me what your problem is, even before I share with him what my problem is. And at the same time, I think he really shows his leadership by doing. And I remember I got involved with Star Talk program. Well, he was the program director, and I was the lead instructor. You know how intensive a Star Talk program can be. So usually, we stayed until late night to complete the curriculum for the next day. I remember it's always like I emailed him my work around 1 a.m., and I got his feedback around 3 a.m. So when I woke up in the morning, I could, make some modifications. And he's always tell me what your problem is. I'm here to support you. Mm-hmm. And really, I think that's how I learned to be a leader, to be a good leader. It's not like you are there doing everything. Instead, you support your team and help them to grow during the process.
That's a really good lesson, and it's hard to learn. So,
my mentor actually have a very similar working style like yours. He was our assistant principal of social studies department in our school for 24 years, and he was a new immigrant to this country. He came to this country, speak zero English, and gave himself a very special name, he think, Jack. So he worked 24/7, never stop, and AP is one of his title. He's working all across the city in different organizations and build a connection, and very inspiring and supporting administration. The one thing I learned from him is never give up, and whenever you have challenges and obstacles, he always have your back. And now he became the principal of a middle school in Brooklyn. So I'm happy about his success and also very inspired by his career trajectory. Yeah, he's a role model for me.
Can I say two really quickly? The first role model that I have, or someone who has really influenced me, is my mom. I would say that, I would consider myself Chinese American, right? I've been here since I was 5, and then I went back to China, stayed there for a few years, and I came back. I really feel that I have the superpower that Chris claims that we have, of being bilingual, bicultural. My parents, maybe they were too busy trying to put a roof over our head and put food on the table as immigrants, but they never pushed me or pressured me into doing any type of career. They're just like, oh yeah, you're doing okay. You're not flunking your classes. You're just do what you want to do, right? And at the time, the reason they sent me back to China was so they could pursue their careers by going to school. So I think they did their best, right? And then the result gave me my career, which they never anticipated, right? It was kind of like this, we had no other choice to send you back, Lynn, so it is what it is. I didn't see them for 4 years. So that's number one, and my mom really used that time. She came when she was 30, didn't speak any English, she became a registered nurse, worked in the hospital for many years, retired, and now she's still working. She doesn't want to retire, just like Frank. She doesn't want to keep working. So that was my first person that really influenced me and allowed me to be who I am. And the second person is a school administrator at my school who is no longer at my school, Jason Craig Harris. He is a diversity practitioner. He teaches and talks about conflict resolution and how to, resolve problems with students, but in a warm and, community building way. He took me to my first People of Color Conference, which is a national large conference for teachers who are non-white, and it blew my mind. The first time I was in a room with 200 plus Asian American educators. I mean, the power of having us divide into so many subcategories was so amazing, and it sort of turned me onto the trajectory about learning about my own identity, being proud of my identity, and then encouraging others to talk about their stories, because all of our stories are so different, and then leaning away from the single narrative that many Americans stereotype and have of Asian people. We're so much more, and we need to talk about it.
Yay. Awesome, thank you. So I'm going to go to the next slide. All right, so Jin Laoshi, number 1, just happens to be the Actiful National Teacher of the Year in 2018. She's the first teacher of Chinese to have that honor. So we're really pleased that you're here today. And Jin Laoshi is involved in a lot of national organizations. CLASS, which I can never remember, Chinese Language Association of Secondary Schools.
Elementary school.
Right, secondary and elementary schools.
Past president.
She's the past president, and she's also on the Actiful Board of Directors now. So the questions that I wanted to ask you are, first, how did you get involved in these organizations and then eventually rise to positions where you are now?
Position of power.
I want to say I was really fortunate to work with a group of great, teachers. And in my school, actually, my colleague Jia 老师, Paul Jia, he was very involved with class then. So he just introduced me to class. And I also remember he said this, if you want to involve more, you have to keep in mind that you are actually doing work, using your own time, volunteer your time for all the Chinese teachers. You're not there for a title or for the power. You're there to serve, the community, the teacher community. And to be honest, I actually enjoy doing, all those kind of things, spending time, working on different events. And also I want to say the team I work with, the class team, is just super. I think we're crazy. We're just the same thing, you get one thing done, sending out at midnight California time, and you got response right away in a couple of hours. So I'm not promoting that, so please make sure you exactly take good care of yourself. Please have enough sleep, okay, please. But what I'm saying is, it's the teamwork that really motivates me, because I know there is a team, so many people behind me, working on towards the same goal with me. And of course, after being awarded the Teacher of the Year, I think I got a chance to see a bigger world. So I think actually today I just purposely dressed this way, because you see I have my Chinese here, that's my root. And at the same time, I have all languages here. So I think on the one hand, of course, I'm a Chinese teacher. Teaching Chinese language and culture has a very special spot in my heart. But at the same time, I think I want to say we are one of the world languages. So it's not like say, oh, please add Chinese program, but cut the Japanese. That's not really what we want. We should have multiple languages. We should have all languages in our programs. So seeing a bigger picture really, I think, opens my mind, opens my eyes, and I see we Chinese teachers, we have a very unique perspective, and we should have really more impact for the field.
Can I shift the next question I ask you, because I want to talk about this very point, which is the idea that Chinese teaching, for a long time, there's been a kind of a separation between world languages. Yeah. We have the European languages and Chinese. Yeah. Right. So how do you see your role as kind of bringing this? Yeah.
I want to go back to my early teaching year. In California, in my area actually, we have a program called Stanford World Language Project. So world language teachers in our area will go to Stanford campus to receive training, I think on 5 Saturdays throughout the school year. So when I started teaching, when I opened my computer, I didn't have a lot of things to teach. So I got trained by my Spanish teacher, mentors, French teacher mentors, Italian teacher mentors. They shared their activities, ideas, strategies with me. And definitely I couldn't take everything, just, because languages are different, right? So I remember that Saturday I picked up ideas. Sunday was the time I really tweaked it, thought about what I could do, and I tried them on Monday in my classroom. So I think this is really, compared with maybe some European languages, we're young. So we need to, like babies, we need someone to hold our hand to walk. But our goal is eventually we can walk on our own. So it's like a, process, gradual step-by-step process.
And I think it's really important also to think about the world language department as a world language department. We can learn from the teachers of other languages. They can learn from us. And we should feel that we can step forward to lead those world language departments.
I cannot agree more, because I really believe the best PD is just down the hallway. I used to share classrooms with so many teachers, my Japanese teacher colleagues, French teacher colleagues, Spanish teacher colleagues. I learned so much. And a lot of things I'm doing now, actually, I borrowed from them. But at the same time, I think I want to work with my, world language teacher colleagues. For instance, now we are really promoting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we're working together to talk about how we can adopt this as the content for all languages. That's just, awesome. Really collaboration is, the way to go.
Great, thank you. So, Jin Yuezhou, I'm not going to say Jin Laoshu number 2. You are such an inspirational teacher. Oh, thank you. We all work together. So Jin Laoshu is an ENL and a Chinese language teacher at New Utrecht High School in Brooklyn for nearly 10 years, and I'm really happy that you're here today. I love the quote that you shared about leadership. It's so inspiring. Leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of the people in your charge. So can you just share with us about your career?
If I choose one word to describe my career so far, I would use advocate. I'm working at a local community school. That means 95% of students are living in this community. It's very common to teach brothers, sisters, or cousins from the same family. And it's based on the demographic and academic needs of our school, it requires teacher not only teaching, but giving to make change or contribute to a feeling and a meaningful life for students. And you can see, look at my career timeline, it pretty much upholds my beliefs. There are 3 thrones to my work after teaching, which is extracurricular activities, cultural enrichment, and mentorship. To enrich the students' life, I was leading debate club, Asian clubs, and we participate in NYU Rock That Movie Festival and received a grand prize. And I also attend our school college awareness day to promote college application. Since our school is a Title I school, Title I means most of our kids are from low-income family. It's very important to model knowledge is power and navigate them a life-changing way further their studies in the college. To facilitate the cultural understanding, I organized a district-wide 3-school Chinese New Year show, which with 1,300 audience together. Wow. Yeah, and also helped to bring students to Japan and Shanghai for a study away. When I did another I just did too much things and I forgot.
Which you haven't said yet is, if you see these pictures here, Jin Laoshu was District 20 Teacher of the Year in 2018. And all of her students came to this event. All of her students, I went as well, and there were probably 40 or 50 students that she's taught who came to this event. They brought her flowers. A lot of teachers from the school came as well, especially the Asian American teachers who were so excited that you were representing Asian American teachers. So, yep. Because I think you were probably the first Asian American teacher in your district to win that award.
First one.
Yeah.
Does this have anything to do with your last name, Jing? Jing Laoshu is a teacher, national and district.
Change my name. Time to change your name, Lynn.
On to the family.
Yeah.
Of course, students get opportunities to embrace the Chinese culture and other different cultures. I think by doing these things, the cultural collaboration has been developed and the communication skills has been practiced. Of course, there were tons of challenges and obstacles I faced. To advocate teaching and giving, what I did was doing PDs in different places, including school, district, NYU DCLT, of course, in Japan Society, and various places. I also, well, this experience fulfill the principle that Robin just mentioned, the leaders lead and influence others by modeling explanatory practices.
So I think that the work that you were telling me about that you've done for your students in the school, your advocacy work, is really powerful. So we've got this 3 prongs here: honor classes, the seal of biliteracy, and AAPI month. So can you tell us a little about those things?
Okay. We always think about leaders leading or managing other people, but why don't we start by leading ourselves? The biggest advocacy I've been done recently was fighting for adding Chinese honor classes for each level in our school. So when I got a chance to look into deeply our school programming, I found all our language classes has honor class besides Chinese. The Chinese honor classes are mysteriously missing. We've been having this conversation with our school administrations for years, but nothing changed. I know making changes has a lot of uncertainties. Therefore, the outcomes are not guaranteed, but I think taking actions are the key. So I wrote a petition, involved students, parents, and even UFD delegates, and all Chinese teachers in our school has to be engaged to address the importance of equal rights and making students' voice be heard. So fortunately, our proposal got approved by the school, and now we offer Chinese honor classes at every level.
So you did this by creating a petition and asking the students and parents and families and school to get involved and sign it.
Yes,
Awesome.
the UFD delegates are very important, remember?
Union.
Yeah, and the last part I think we want to talk about is NYS, New York State Seal of Biliteracy Program. If you are from the other states, here's a brief introduction of New York State Seal of Biliteracy. It is a word given by school district or state in recognition of those who studied or attained a proficiency in 2 or more languages by high school graduation. So you literally get a medal, as you see in the picture, and a seal on your diploma. Biliteracy program requires students to do the research, not only on their own culture, but other cultures and countries. In our school, we provide seals in Spanish, Chinese, Italian, Turkish, Russian, and Arabic.
Wow, that's cool.
Yes, that's a lot. So this program prepares students for college-level reading and writing, meanwhile accelerating the cultural identity and understanding, and recognize the value of our students' bilingual skills. Before the Seal Biliteracy program, our students' multilingualism background is not valued, even though it should be an asset for all the students speak another language. So I think we really need to work on and fight for their rights and talents to make them be recognized. For the past 2 years, I'm major focused working on Seal Biliteracy Committee. As a committee member, a coordinator next year, I'm working with all language teachers, including English teacher. That's very great opportunity to practice leadership, because you need to work with the people come from different cultures, speak different languages, working together, moving forward.
Thank you so much. That's really great to see. So within our communities and our schools, what a difference we can make. And I think you're well on your way to being a big leader in your community and in New York City.
Wish.
So, yeah. And also I want to say that Jin Laoshi has been an amazing mentor to more than 10 student teachers, most of them from NYU, over the past 5 years or more. So actually, it's got to be more than 10 students. So that is another big part of giving back and being a leader is mentoring a student teacher. So Lynn Laoshi has also been a mentor to NYU student teachers. In fact, the year I met you, you were teaching at Bronx Science. You were a student at NYU in the master's program, and you were mentoring 2 NYU student teachers, one of whom, Cho Bing, is now one of the Mandarin teachers at Bronx Science, and he's been there for more than 10 years now. Yeah.
Yeah, like
So,
15.
What inspires me about Lynn Lin is her, she's a wonderful teacher, a wonderful mentor, and she's a good reminder of clicking the slides. But her work that she started to mention to you, that her mentor inspired her to take on around identity and DEIJ, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And so I hope you can tell us a little bit about your journey and that work that you're doing.
Yeah, so I grew up in Northern California, one of many, many Asians in California. I didn't really feel special, didn't feel like I had any superpowers. I'm Asian, I go to a school, lots of Asians, public school my whole life. And then I started working at multiple different private schools. I found my real home at my current one, which is Friends Seminary. It is a Quaker school that has been in New York City since 1786. It's one of the first co-educational independent schools in New York City. And there I met Jason, who was our director of diversity, and he took me along to the People of Color Conference, where it really planted a seed, because as you know, many Chinese language teachers are the only Chinese language teacher, perhaps, the only Asian face, perhaps, in your school, in your entire district, right? So you can imagine how lonely it feels, right? And how sometimes we are very easily erased or unseen, right? Don't make any noise, work hard, keep your head down, is what I've been told growing up. But now it's time for us to rock the boat and for us to make some waves, right? And make some change. There's different types of changes that I want to make. We want to make some systemic changes in our school, in our policies, in hiring. And so join as many committees as you can at school. Take turns, maybe be on a committee for every 2 years, and learn about the ins and outs of your school, right? After going to POCC and meeting other Asian American educators who I didn't think existed, but clearly they do exist, I also was exposed to another conference that's called the Asian Educators Alliance Conference. It's an annual conference. It's been happening now for 13 years. They travel bi-coastal. The recent one was in California, and I hear that next year it'll be back here on the East Coast somewhere. And it's another group of educators who teach a variety of subjects, and many of them are in administrative roles, and they are also, and they have been, my mentors. So at Friends, I'm there for 9 years now. My son is now a kindergarten student, so I'm now also a parent, a new role for myself. I'm one of few Asian faces. I think there are 5 of us total at school, including 2 people who work in the business office as our accountants, right? So I became sort of the token Asian. And I don't want to be seen as the token Asian. I want every Asian American educator to share their own story, because students think that we're all the same. They confuse our names often, right? And that's just not who we are. And we want them to have a different understanding of the diversity that is Asian Americans, which encompasses 48 different countries into one terminology. Think about the millions and millions of stories. And for my Asian American students, I want them to be able to see themselves and be proud of themselves and have role models. Growing up in California, I would like to say that I did have an Asian American teacher in a public school, and I did see an Asian American anchor, Connie Chung, on TV. Those were my 2 role models. That was it. I didn't meet any doctors who were Asian. I didn't meet any engineers who were Asian. The next time I had a teacher who was Asian American was in college. So the fact that there weren't many of us choosing teaching as a profession is one issue, right? The fact that there aren't many of us in general doing multiple different fields, and now it's a whole new world. Hollywood, media, politics, there are so many of us now, right? So that's really encouraging. So during the pandemic, I met some like-minded teachers. We are from 5 different states, and we started a group called Courageous Dialogue with Chinese Educators. During COVID, I received lots of questions, even from my really amazing and warm and loving community, about COVID. Do you have COVID, Lynn? Does your family have COVID? Did you go to China recently? I had all these questions, and I imagined that they really came from a place of curiosity, right? And so I began talking about the rise of Asian hate crimes in New York City and how that added another layer of fear to the medical pandemic that we were all experiencing. And I imagine my Asian American students commuting to school and whether they were safe and whether they knew how to protect themselves if they had encountered any type of confrontational situation. What do? So a few of us started with just kind of inviting teachers from all over the country to talk and share about their experiences during COVID, kind of like to vent, right? What was it like for you? Oh, that sucks. Oh yeah, my God, me too. That helps. Just talking about it, having somebody to say, wow, those feelings and those experiences are real. And I'm so sorry that you had to experience that. For many teachers, especially in other states who were the only, I felt like the platform really provided a way for them to find some way to have mental health, better mental health. And then we realized as participants came to our Zoom events that teachers needed some more support. All of us have different journeys that led us to teaching. I have to admit that I didn't major in teaching in my undergrad, but I kind of fell into the career or the occupation because my senior year of college, a local private school was expanding into high school and they wanted to teach Chinese. I don't know how many people got the job. No teaching experience got the job. And so I was there for 3 years. It's a Waldorf school, which is a very different philosophy of teaching. And it really paved the way for me to come to NYU to pursue my teaching. It really let me do kind of whatever I want because there's no one else telling me any different. Nobody spoke Chinese. So I kind of got to explore what I wanted to do. So after starting CDCE and having a few dialogues with the participants who came, we realized that a lot of teachers come from different places and have a, more or less or a spectrum of understanding of American history and Asian American history. Like, why are people being mean to Asians because of COVID? Why is there so much racism and so much hate? People didn't understand, and we felt like teachers needed support. So we did a lot of scenarios. If you heard this kind of dialogue from your colleague or this kind of remark, what could you say? Do you know how to find an ally at school? Do you know what is sort of the leadership ladder at your school? If you encountered, what is harassment, right? If you encountered something negative, who can you go talk to? And what is the difference between racism and a stereotype and an implicit or explicit bias? These are all very different things, and we felt like a lot of teachers didn't really quite have the sort of community norms or the foundation of dealing with these kinds of issues, on top of health issues, on top of being isolated, on top of standing in lines in the supermarket, on top of all the things that teachers had to deal with during COVID. And that really allowed me to meet like-minded people, and then we started presenting at conferences. We started presenting at NYU's DCLT. We started presenting at the Asian Educators Alliance conference and talking about, finding your journey of finding a place or an identity where you truly feel like you belong, but not stopping there, right? Moving on forward to advocacy and then taking action, and what action might look like at every single school might be different. And so even if it's just planting a little seed, having that one conversation that really felt deep and meaningful between you and a colleague or you and a parent can help the other person really truly feel seen and appreciated, and how long of a way that can go.
And I want to thank you for this work. It's really important. Like the work all of us have talked about, all of you have talked about today, the work that you're doing is really important. I know that you've offered some CDCE offers workshops, so you can contact CDCE if you're interested in learning about this kind of work. If you're interested in having them zoom into your school or your community to have these conversations, to help you to understand how to have them. And the environment has not gotten less challenging. It's, I think, gotten more challenging even as COVID has receded, but just the environment, the political environment has made things more challenging as well. So the work is really appreciated. So thank you. So I want to thank all of the teachers who have shared their experiences today, and I hope that it's inspired some of you to think about what you're doing and where you might take that. And maybe you've noticed that, hey, we don't have honors classes in Chinese, but we have them in French and Spanish. Or maybe you've noticed that your school doesn't have a committee that thinks about diversity, equity issues. Some schools it's going to be more challenging than others, but every school hopefully has a place for this kind of discussion. So, Michèle was, as I said, unable to be here, so she has shared some ideas about ways to more kind of officially, for lack of a better word, think about your future paths as teachers and as leaders. So if we could play that video now.
So how do you reignite your spark? How do you reinvigorate? How do you connect with other people in the field? What kinds of professional development do you participate in to learn? What are your spheres of influence? Do you think about that? How are you participating, presenting in your school level, on your local level, within your community? What about on the state level, on the regional level, or even on the national level? Sometimes we think about what I just demonstrated, that we're growing out in our spheres of influence, but oftentimes we have teachers that are actually more impactful and have more connections on the international level, and they're working on how to make more connections on their school level. So reflect on that for a little while. What are your spheres of influence? And then think about the organizations that you are maybe already familiar with. Of course, you know about NCLC. We're here today. I know that you know about CLASS and CELAN and all these different wonderful organizations that are pictured here on the screen. But have you thought about some of the smaller aspects of them? Maybe you belong to CLTA, but you're not necessarily involved in the regional aspect. Maybe you've attended ACTFL, big, huge conference, but you're not so involved in the SIG. Those are the special interest groups. I encourage you to think about all of the different places that you are already participating and think about how you might grow a little bit more, where you might see yourself in a leadership role within the organizations that you're already familiar with. But if you're also interested in exploring new places, you might think about going to our NCSSFL website. That's ncsssfl.org. And there you will find a wealth of resources, including on the top of our landing page, this area that's called resources. And there on the bottom, you'll see there's a number of lists. There's national language associations, there's regional language associations, and there's other national educational organizations that aren't necessarily tied to languages, but you might find interesting. Maybe you are really interested in working with curriculum development, or maybe you want to be an administrator of the whole school and not just the language component. You'll find some things and some resources on the NCSSFL website to help you with that. You might be sitting in the audience today as a college professor or a university professor, or maybe you're working in a private school or in a charter school, and in these different ways you were not required to have a teacher's license or a teacher's certification in the state where you are currently living, but maybe you're thinking about changing. The NCSSFL website on that same page offers you a link to where you can learn about the licensure in each one of those different states. So this is a live map. You can click on the different states and it will take you directly to that state's website where they talk about the certification necessary to be a teacher, if that's what you're interested in trying to do, including the reciprocity, where if you're certified in one particular state, you could go to another state. But you should also be aware that as part of StarTalk, we have another website that's called Lang Cred, and it also has a live map that it offers for you, and it not only shows you the way that you can be credentialed at each one of these different states, but it also addresses teacher preparation programs. So if you're interested or if you need that kind of information, we have that there for you as well. State licensure, and also the university courses and such you would need. When you're thinking about becoming a leader, you might need additional licensure. For instance, you might need additional training, or you might need to take another test, get another endorsement, or even earn another degree. Because if you decide that you would like to become a principal, for instance, most principalships will require that you have a master's degree in something, maybe education, but maybe it would be a master's plus a different type of preparation. I've included some links to other states because as NSSFL, we represent all states. The Louisiana Department of Education has a great video here that outlines the ways that people can achieve becoming a school leader, like a principal or an assistant principal. They also have a great mentor leader library full of resources. And so does Ohio. They have a wonderful mentor toolkit. So if you're thinking about that you would like to be a mentor for someone else, you might refer to some of these resources that are here. Maybe you'll need to pursue a teacher training program, and Texas has a great list of the things that they offer. Sometimes it's things that are only unique to that particular state, but sometimes they're ones that can address different states, and they're applicable both in Texas and in Louisiana. Or if you're really not sure what type of leader you might want to be, you might take a look at Utah's website, where they have an entire menu that talks about the different types of leadership and what you would need to do for each one of those. Regardless of what pathway you might choose and how you might be a leader, whether it is within an organization or whether it is within the school systems and the education system, I hope that you continue and you pursue those interests and those paths, and you reach out that hand to someone else to join you in the path towards leadership.
Awesome. Thank you, Michèle. I hope you're watching. So, just very quickly, because I just got this, which I think means time. What types of leaders do you think we need in the field of Chinese language teaching? Frank, you want to start?
We need somebody who is willing to take up the challenge. It is not easy to be a leader. The leader, on the one hand, it's putting on you the pressure. The other is that you pursue that leadership. So you need to really think about that. Don't just look at your own career as a teacher, but need to look beyond that. We really need somebody who can look beyond your classroom and into the school, and into this district, and into, say, nationwide.
Awesome, thank you.
I really want to just follow what Tang Lao Shi was just talking about. And I want to say, start from small. Really start from small things. During the department meeting, volunteer yourself to take notes. And when they need someone to represent your department during the, all school, just volunteer yourself. Just start from very little things, but have the courage to push yourself, just to have one step further, and you all just keep going.
For me, it's pretty simple. As I said, I want to be a giver and advocator all the time to my students and community.
And I think that to recognize all of our different journeys and our different stories as a strength and not something that's divisive, right?
Awesome, thank you so much. And that, I'm going to skip the last one because we already did it. So I want to say, I'm skipping it anyhow. Thank you everybody for coming today. We really appreciate your listening, and I hope you, it went the wrong way. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.